This show is part of OnePlace, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to today's roundup. We are covering a massive shift in airport security, a historic currency change, and major legal battles involving international leaders and the tech industry. Let's get into the details.
A judge considers if Venezuela can pay Maduro's legal fees.
Trump orders immediate pay for airport security during shutdown.
A federal judge blocks the Pentagon's ban on Anthropic.
The White House moves to end the airport staffing crisis.
Trump's signature will soon appear on American dollar bills.
Minnesota sues the federal government over ICE agent shootings.
Juries find Meta and YouTube liable for harming children.
Lawmakers propose a moratorium on new AI data centers.
ICE agents deploy to airports to cover security gaps.
Prosecutors claim Maduro plundered wealth to fund his defense.
First, the Maduro case. In a New York courtroom, a federal judge is currently weighing a complex constitutional question regarding former Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. Maduro and his wife Celia Flores appeared in court wearing beige jail uniforms as their legal team argued that U.S. sanctions are unfairly blocking them from using Venezuelan government funds to pay for their defense. The couple faces a 25-page indictment alleging they worked with drug cartels to ship massive amounts of cocaine into the United States. Their lawyers contend that preventing access to these funds violates their fundamental right to a fair legal defense.
Judge Alvin Hellerstein noted that the diplomatic landscape has shifted significantly since Maduro was first captured in January. With the U.S. and Venezuela reestablishing relations, and Washington easing some oil sanctions, the judge questioned if the original basis for blocking these funds still holds weight. While the prosecution insists that the sanctions must remain in place to prevent the use of state resources for personal legal battles, the judge emphasized that the right to a defense is a paramount constitutional concern. No final ruling was issued, but the tension between national security sanctions and legal rights remains the central focus.
Next up, President Trump has announced an executive order to pay TSA agents as the partial government shutdown continues to paralyze American travel. For weeks, travelers have faced unprecedented wait times, with some queues in Houston stretching over 4 hours and reaching into parking garages. The Department of Homeland Security has been unfunded since February, forcing essential TSA workers to stay on the job without receiving their paychecks. This financial strain has led to a massive wave of resignations, with over 450 agents quitting and thousands more calling out of work, leaving security checkpoints severely understaffed and causing chaos across major hubs.
The situation has become a breaking point for the administration, as the TSA's acting chief reported the longest wait times in the agency's 24-year history. In Houston, nearly 40% of the security staff failed to show up for work recently, forcing the airport to operate at half capacity. While the president's social media post promised immediate payment to address this emergency, the specific mechanism for funding these salaries remains unclear, without a congressional budget agreement. Travelers are being warned that even with this order, the backlog and staffing shortages may take significant time to resolve, as the political impasse persists.
Now, to AI. A federal judge in California has handed a significant victory to the artificial intelligence company Anthropic by blocking a Pentagon directive. Judge Rita Lynn ruled that the government cannot immediately force agencies to stop using Anthropic's tools, such as the Claude AI model. This follows a move by President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to label the company a supply chain risk, a designation usually reserved for foreign adversaries. Anthropic sued, claiming the ban was a retaliatory strike against their concerns over how the military uses AI. The judge agreed, suggesting the government's actions appeared to be a classic case of First Amendment retaliation.
The ruling highlights a sharp divide between the administration and the tech sector. Judge Lynn pointed out that the president and Secretary Hegseth had publicly criticized the company using political labels like woke, rather than providing evidence of actual security flaws. If this were a simple contract dispute, the Department of Defense could have just stopped using the software, but the judge found the sweeping ban exceeded normal bounds. For now, Anthropic's tools will remain in use across government agencies and by military contractors. The company expressed satisfaction with the ruling, stating they want to ensure all Americans benefit from safe and reliable AI technology.
Moving on, the White House is exploring extraordinary measures to bypass the congressional deadlock over Department of Homeland Security funding. President Trump has signaled he is willing to invoke a national emergency or shift money from other federal sources to ensure TSA agents receive their pay. This move comes as the shutdown enters its 41st day, leaving workers on the verge of missing their second consecutive payday. Republican leaders have praised the decision as the right thing to do for national security, while some senators suggest there is existing funding that can be legally redirected to the TSA and Coast Guard without a formal emergency declaration.
Despite the president's promise, the political reality in Washington remains tense. Democrats are refusing to approve the broader Homeland Security budget until there are significant reforms to immigration enforcement operations. This has left the Senate at a standstill, even as travel delays and airport closure warnings mount. With over 3,000 daily callouts and a rising number of resignations, the pressure on the administration to act unilaterally has become overwhelming. While the president's order may provide temporary financial relief to the workers, the underlying budget battle over immigration policy shows no signs of a permanent resolution, as both parties remain dug in.
Next story? In an unprecedented move for a sitting president, Donald Trump's signature will soon be featured on U.S. banknotes. The Treasury Department announced that the president's name will appear alongside Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on dollar bills, starting with the $100 note this June. Traditionally, currency features the signatures of the U.S., Treasurer, and the Treasury Secretary, but this new plan breaks a tradition that has been in place since 1861. Secretary Bessent described the move as a powerful way to recognize the country's historic achievements and the president's leadership as the nation approaches its 250th anniversary of independence from Britain.
The announcement has already sparked a wave of political criticism, particularly from California Governor Gavin Newsom. Newsom argued that putting the president's name on the currency will give Americans a clear reminder of who to blame for rising costs in groceries, gas, and rent. This follows other efforts by the administration to associate the Trump name with government programs, such as the stimulus checks sent during his first term. While supporters see it as a celebration of American prosperity and strength, critics view it as a departure from the neutral tradition of U.S. currency. Regardless of the debate, the first bills are scheduled for production very soon.
Now to Minnesota. Minnesota officials have launched a landmark legal battle against the Trump administration over a series of shootings involving immigration and customs enforcement agents. The state has filed a federal lawsuit against the Departments of Homeland Security and Justice after federal officials refused to cooperate with local investigations. The conflict began after the fatal shooting of Renee Good, a mother of three, and subsequent incidents involving other individuals in Minneapolis. Local prosecutors say the federal government has blocked access to critical evidence and refused to release the names of the agents involved, which Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison described as a rare and intolerable lack of cooperation.
This case is quickly becoming a major test of states' rights versus federal immunity. Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty called the lawsuit unprecedented, noting that local law enforcement usually partners with federal agencies after such incidents. The Trump administration's refusal to engage has created a standoff that could take years to resolve in the courts. Legal experts are watching closely, as the outcome will determine if state prosecutors can hold federal agents criminally accountable during the president's immigration surge. For now, the administration is holding firm, setting the stage for a long-term constitutional fight over transparency and the limits of federal protection for its officers.
Shift to tech. Juries in California and New Mexico have delivered a massive blow to big tech, finding Meta and YouTube liable for harming children. In Los Angeles, a jury determined that both platforms were responsible for mental health issues and addiction among young users. Meanwhile, a New Mexico jury found that Meta knowingly concealed the extent of child sexual exploitation on its services. These verdicts mark the first time that juries have sided with the long-standing claims of parents, educators, and whistleblowers who argue that social media algorithms are designed in ways that are inherently detrimental to the well-being of teenagers and children.
Advocacy groups are hailing these decisions as the end of big tech's invincibility. For years, companies like Google and Meta have argued that any harms were unintentional side effects of broader societal problems. However, the evidence presented in these trials convinced jurors that the companies were aware of the risks and failed to act. While Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg testified that he didn't believe addiction applied to his products, the public perception seems to be shifting toward holding these corporations accountable. Both companies plan to appeal the verdicts, but the legal precedent could lead to a new wave of regulation and fundamental changes in platform design.
Next up, Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are pushing for a dramatic halt to the expansion of AI infrastructure. They have introduced a bill that would ban the construction of new data centers until federal legislation is passed to regulate artificial intelligence. Sanders has called the rapid, unregulated growth of AI an existential threat to humanity, citing concerns over economic displacement, environmental impact, and the well-being of children. The proposed moratorium is intended to give Congress time to establish protections for workers and consumers, as well as privacy and environmental standards that the lawmakers argue are currently being ignored by the tech industry.
The proposal faces stiff opposition, even within the Democratic Party. Critics like Senator Mark Warner have labeled the idea of a moratorium as idiocy, arguing that stopping U.S. development would simply allow China to take the lead in the global AI race. There is also significant concern about the economic impact of stalling such a massive growth sector. Sanders, however, remains undeterred, suggesting that the lack of urgency in Congress is due to the heavy influence of tech industry campaign contributions. This bill sets up a major debate over whether the risks of AI outweigh the competitive necessity of rapid technological advancement.
Now to airports. As the TSA staffing crisis deepens, President Trump has deployed ICE agents to major airports to help fill the gaps. Unlike the TSA, ICE has remained fully funded because Congress allocated $75 billion to the agency last summer. These agents are now appearing at security checkpoints to assist with the massive surges in wait times caused by the government shutdown. Experts note that ICE agents have broad federal law enforcement authority, including the power to question and arrest individuals without a warrant if they have reasonable suspicion of illegal status. This deployment has raised questions about how their presence will change the typical airport security experience.
The use of ICE agents in civilian airports is a significant expansion of their traditional role. While they can arrest anyone witnessing a crime, their primary focus remains immigration enforcement. Critics have pointed out that the administration has allowed ICE to use more confrontational tactics recently, including the use of plainclothes officers. With thousands of TSA workers calling out of work due to the lack of pay, the administration views this as a necessary step to keep travel moving. However, the presence of armed immigration agents at domestic travel hubs is creating a new atmosphere of tension for many travelers and civil rights advocates across the country.
Finally, the legal battle over Nicolas Maduro's defense funds took another turn as U.S. prosecutors accused the former leader of plundering Venezuela's wealth. During a court hearing, the government argued that Maduro should not be allowed to use state money to pay his lawyers because those funds were essentially stolen from the Venezuelan people. Prosecutors also claimed that Maduro and his wife have personal assets they could use instead, a claim the couple denies. The defense argued that the case is so complex that a court-appointed public defender would be overwhelmed, potentially depriving Maduro of his right to effective counsel in a foreign legal system.
Judge Alvin Hellerstein appeared somewhat sympathetic to the defense's concerns, noting that the right to a legal defense is a fundamental principle that must be protected. While he refused to dismiss the narco-terrorism charges entirely, he is still considering whether to allow the use of the frozen Venezuelan funds. The Maduros, who were seized in a dramatic raid in Caracas earlier this year, sat quietly through the proceedings, a sharp contrast to their defiant first appearance. The judge's eventual ruling on this funding issue will be a critical factor in how one of the most high-profile international criminal trials in U.S. history proceeds.
That concludes our briefing for today. Thank you for joining us for this daily roundup of the most important stories. We will be back tomorrow with more updates. Have a great day.